Morning, everyone, and welcome to Strategy Café. It's lovely to see everybody. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our guest, James, the dish of the day, and we'll get stuck into a really wonderful conversation, which I think you will find is deeply steeped in a sense of values and purpose. But before we get going this morning, a bit of a reminder to you that our past leadership webinars are on our YouTube channel, which you can see there on the slide. So we have 70 fabulous leadership interviews and discussions on a huge range of topics and sectors. Just the last few months, we had John Hart in from Integrity Governance on getting deal ready. We had Capital Raising Supremo, David Levine, talking about the mistakes not to make in your funding deck and investor pitches. We had Scale Up HR Director Peter Van Eden on how to help people perform in fast growth companies. And last month, Ned talking about the essential non-exec and chair roles in a company. Fabulous stuff. And I highly recommend you dive in for ideas, inspiration. And if you find stuff that's useful and interesting, please like it and share it. So you can find that on our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for Alembic. And then you'll find you can subscribe to us. You can click on the Strategy Cafe playlist, and if you prefer to have it as a podcast, you can get it on Spotify, Apple, or SoundCloud. So, James, it's absolutely lovely to have you this morning. Introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for having me, Nick. Yeah, I'm James Mitra. I'm the founder of JBM. We're an executive search firm that work with high growth startups and VC investors. I set the business up 11 and a half years ago, mainly because I was pretty frustrated at how transactional corporate recruitment was. Wanted to build my own business, do something a bit different that's really focused on building meaningful relationships and also working with more entrepreneurial people. So we've grown completely through word of mouth over the last decade or so. And alongside the day job of sort of placing executives into sort of disruptive startups, we also have a podcast called 40 Minute Mentor, where we've interviewed 250 leaders to talk about their careers, but the real version of the startup journey, the brutal one, learning about the challenges overcome, as well as all the good bits. And we just hit 1 million downloads for that. So we're really thrilled at how that's sort of been taken by our network. And for me personally, it's been amazing. As somebody that started a business at 25, it's been a sort of hack to learning from some of the best leaders around by spending an hour talking to them about how they got to where they are. So that's a bit about me outside of the day job. Proud husband and father of an 8-year-old, and married my sort of, I guess you would say, school sweetheart. We didn't go out from school, but I've known her since I was 11. So, you know, a proud family man and long-suffering Aston Villa fan.
That's amazing. Amazing about the downloads for the podcast. Highly recommended. So we should give people a pointer so they can go and subscribe and listen in. And it's lovely to be able to reciprocate. And I completely agree with you about the amazing facility of being able to hack lessons by talking to fabulous leaders. It's just so cool, and that's why you're here. So nice to reciprocate. Right, before we get going, a little poll. So just interested to get your views on this. So what's most important to you when you're recruiting for a startup or a scale-up? Is it culture, values alignment? Is it choosing the right candidates with early stage experience? Is it a rigorous process, deep referencing? Selling the opportunity to the candidates or other? Just interested in what you guys think. Good answers, group. So I think you can see there that most of you've kind of plumped for culture and values alignment, which makes so much sense to me. And we'll get into it. So One of the reasons I really love to interview founders is it's really hard to found a business, isn't it, James? And years down the track, those lessons seem like they're just who you are because they become so ingrained. They almost seem like they're natural or automatic. And you can look at people 11 years down the track and think, my goodness me, you're quite cool. But there's always a story behind those critical leadership lessons. And it's great just to unearth those origins. And we were talking about networking, right? So whether you're expecting to start with this, it maybe seems like an odd one to start with, but I think it's really core to how you see the business. We were talking about networking, and I think, some people find networking fine. Many people find it really hard and not quite sure what it's there for. No, it's important. My sense is that you were probably no exception to that originally. And I really loved the story you told me about how that framing of networking changed for you through a chance encounter at a registration desk. So tell us a little bit about this story, James.
Yeah, gladly. So I think a lot of people see networking as this slightly cringy, schmoozy thing, and quite awkward. And a lot of people don't like to be associated with that word. And don't get me wrong, back in the day, I actually felt the same. I felt, despite being a kind of naturally more extroverted person, I always found events really difficult and hard work, and I'd have to really get myself up for going. Um, and there was this one experience that you're alluding to that for me sort of totally reframed how I looked and approached networking events. And I went to a Techstar event, and I was sort of trying to sign in using this high tech screen. And this sounds ridiculous now because it's pretty commonplace, but quite a few years ago, a decade or so ago, I'd never really used one to sign in. So I was I met this woman that was standing next to me, similarly struggling, I think. And I think we were giggling about how inept I was at all things technology, which is ironic, I know, because I recruit into the tech space. But we started chatting away, and it turned out as we walked into the event together that she was a people leader and had recently left a unicorn tech startup that was a client of ours that we'd recently been working with. So instantly, we sort of had a rapport. We knew a lot of the same people, including a good mate of mine from uni that worked there as well. We just really hit it off and very quickly started to share sort of war stories from the worlds of people and talent, and quickly realized we had very similar points of view, very shared values. And it was such a positive experience for us both. I think we both had admitted we were dreading going to the event. We sort of stuck quite close to each other for an hour or so. We're able to bring other people into that conversation. Um, and her name was Philippa Monitz. And not long after, she had actually just moved to a new fintech client, and she became a really important client for JBM. She then, through that became a kind of confidant, so almost a sort of mentor to me. She was the face of our website for a number of years. She gave us a testimonial and was front and center. Became a great friend to me in the business, and has supported me pretty consistently with people related challenges over the years. So for me, it was just, I came away from that going, wow, this chance encounter has had a really positive impact on me and JBM because we took the time to really get to know each other and speak, and we took the leap of faith to have that conversation. And that's really for me what makes a difference. I think most people think, when they think networking, they're like, I've got to go win a client, get some leads, get my brand out there, sell. Whereas actually, the reframing for me was, well, actually, if I look at networking about building connection and deeper relationships, and really take that kind of ask more questions and listen rather than sell, very quickly you'll get to find common ground, you'll build trust, and you can see where that relationship goes. So I now go to networking events, sort of trying to embrace it as a learning opportunity, a chance to meet new people, hear fresh perspectives, hopefully help others. I'm a big believer in karma and paying it forward where you can, and I do think it comes back around. And I've found ever since I've kind of had that slight subtle switch in how I view it, that I really enjoy them a lot more, and they're very rewarding. And I guess JBM's organic growth story has kind of come off the back of that, but not just kind of going to lots of events. Actually, it's bringing that into everyday sort of business. It's making networking a daily occurrence. It's everyday interactions. It's making a good impression early doors, and really taking the time to build meaningful relationships and connections. So for me, that really left an imprint. And I guess the kind of extension of that is just my belief that sometimes you just have to talk to people. I think sometimes we're losing the art of conversation. Many strange examples. I met a guy on a train on the way back from a rugby match sort of 12, 13 years ago. We were stuck there, poor bloke, as myself and all my rugby teammates. He was looking for a quiet journey from Bournemouth to London, and he got stuck with us. And very quickly we started talking. And I gave him a beer, and we started chatting. And I heard about his business, and I found it so inspiring. It was an impact-driven consumer business. They turn waste products into luxury goods. It's called Elvis and Cressy. And that 2-hour journey was the spark that led me to sort of start JBM a few months later. And we swapped business cards. I dropped him an email when I started the business saying, I know you probably won't remember me, this random bloke on a train, but hearing about your purpose, hearing about the entrepreneurialism and your journey was really inspired me. And I just want to say thank you. And off the back of that, we've become great friends. His wife and co-founder was my first ever board advisor. And again, the impact of that random conversation, but just asking some questions and getting to know somebody, has had a kind of ripple effect in my life and career. So big advocate for going out there and talking to people, and you never know what happens off the back of it.
I really love the reframe. And I think, James, it's so interesting also hearing about it not in a conventional setting, but in the train setting. Like, that's not networking unless it's network
No.
railway. Not networking. It's a train. It's a train. There's something in this idea, I think, of how we set our expectations. A networking event it's almost like a magic spell, right? So just say I'm going out networking. There's a whole series of behaviors that go with that phrase that are expectations. You don't need to say them, right? They're just what you're expecting to do. And it can be really difficult, I think, to overcome that. So train journey, you don't speak to strangers. You just sit quietly, and these days you put your earphones on. In the old days, maybe you'd hide behind a paper copy of the Times, maybe the technology changes, but the behavior is as expected. So it's quite a thing, I think, to reframe, to overcome that. And I wonder do you think that you're natural? Like, so talking to somebody on a train is quite a rare skill. It's definitely something I would do, but I don't see many people do that. And do you think you've got something in you that naturally wants to engage?
Yeah, probably. I think naturally I'm curious. I think
Mm,
because of my day job, I'm always interested in what people do and why they
mm,
do it. I find careers fascinating. So probably I am naturally the sort of person that will start conversation. But I also think it's down to the school I went to. I went to a very unique school called Christ Hospital, which is actually one of the really last remaining charity schools in the country. And what you have there is a real melting pot, a hugely rich, diverse group of people that come from all over, often inner city homes, underprivileged backgrounds. And but we were steeped in this tradition of this school that goes back to King Edward VI, the boy king, who started it as a charitable foundation. So it's a really interesting mix. You have diversity in all its forms, and then the Queen would come to our school, and we'd be forced to march through London and have a service at St Paul's Cathedral. So I found that my friends from school are kind of social butterflies. They're able to, they're very comfortable on a council estate in Tottenham, but at the same time they can mix it with the great and the good, but very like low ego. None of that really matters to them. It's just about interesting conversations and being able to engage and adapt to different situations, and I've always found that really fascinating. Like I love meeting people from all walks of life. So I think probably it's a combination of maybe a natural instinct, but also sort of the school I went to and the upbringing I had.
I think it's a beautiful answer. It really resonates with me. Curiosity, and maybe an interest in having some curious conversations, right? And then that being the lead into making a connection. So I really like
Yeah.
the link between the courage to be curious and then, what happens is you make a real connection at a deeper level. And I just wonder, like people thinking while they're listening online, you can put comments in the chat if you like. So, do you have a kind of similar view about networking? Is it just, hard work, and do you have that kind of prefix mindset, or like James, are you able to go to an evening like this and thinking, oh gosh, I wonder who I'll meet, and not try to sell, but instead be connected, right? So it's a really beautiful way of thinking about it. But this takes me into another kind of aspect of it. So I love the fact that we talked about a networking event and you meeting this lady at the sign-in desk, and but then also putting us in the context of a train journey. And the long-term impact of those things. So that takes me to the idea of not networking, but your network, right? And I feel like the way that you see the business is through this lens of connections. Tell us a little bit about how this is sort of central to your model.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe in that saying, your network is your net worth. For us, first impressions are very important. In the world of executive search, you live and die off the basis of the service you provide, and the impact you have. And so for me, from early on, I was always about trying to give 10-star service wherever possible, but also just being very honest. I think recruitment has a reputation potentially with a lot of people for being, people just sell all the time and don't listen. And that was a thing that I was very clear from the outset. When I set up the business, I was 25, and if I'm honest, I didn't have a lot of experience. So understandably, there were a lot of skeptics. And one of the reasons I did go it alone was that I was just a bit fed up of people rolling their eyes when I told them what I did, because they just assumed I was a salesy, very
Yeah.
transactional recruiter, and that
Yeah.
never has been the case. Like
Mm.
I love the consultative aspects of the job. I love the relationship side. I love the intellectual stimulation you get from talking to super smart people about really interesting businesses. And so I was like, well, maybe I need to change some hearts and minds about this. Maybe I should stop being embarrassed about being associated with this industry and just carve my own path. And so for me, relationships are at the absolute bedrock of that. So from the first few clients that took a punt on me, it was about building deep trust and then really working incredibly hard to execute for them.
Mm.
And then what I've always said from day one was I never wanted to sort of overly advertise the business. The strength of our brand would come through doing a great job for others and then letting them do the talking for us. And so, we were able to grow from, doing great work for a founder or an executive, and then not being afraid to say, well, if you've been happy with this service, I'd be super grateful if you could pass on my details, or let anyone else in your network know. And the same goes for the candidate side. And although what that means is it's slower, it takes time, but it also compounds over time. But the expectations and the bar is super high, so you have to maintain that, and that's difficult when you get busy and as you grow. Um, but I'll be honest, I love that. I wouldn't have it any other way, and the fact we've been able to grow in that, with that at its heart, is probably the thing I'm most proud of. And I think if it's what we look for in our team as well. So for me, staying authentic to that relationship approach is the most important thing for JBM.
I think it's really well put, and it's a nice segue into this conversation about values. And I think James, you just oozing a set of values as you talk. It's quite inspiring just to listen to you. But we had this really interesting conversation. I get the point about like people frame recruitment and search as being kind of a bit of a dog eat dog world. Aggressively competitive, maybe is a good way of putting it, right?
Mm.
And quite a lot of people in your space wouldn't hesitate just to, take somebody away from you. And we had a conversation about this idea of taking somebody away from you, which I just think is really interesting, resonant phrase. Like that person is somehow your stock. That person is somehow owned by you, almost like there's an essence of this, like they're your property. Right. And how does this attitude of getting the quality of the relationships right shift that for you? That idea of, yeah, they're not my property.
Yeah, so maybe it helps just to go back to the kind of recruitment world that I grew up in. I was on the graduate scheme of a big corporate, and there it was just the norm across the industry that you didn't speak to your competition because there was this sense of they would steal your clients, and it was the same in terms of talent. Like you would be out the door if you were seen even talking to the competition. It was that sort of thing, or if you were trying to head from other, it would get very intense and aggressive amongst recruitment companies. There was just this really old school approach. So and sadly, when I set up JBM, I worried a bit about that. I thought, oh, I can't talk publicly about the work that I'm doing or show case studies because I know what recruiters are like. They'll come and steal my clients. Funnily enough, a competitor lifted nearly all of the language from one of our early websites, and our early website was really quite rubbish, to be honest with you. So I was seeing all these little things, and I was thinking, oh God, goodness, this is awful. I just have to keep everything within. Um, and then a really important thing happened. A friend of mine from my village, I asked her. We always do a yearly offsite, and our team was very small at the time, just three of us. And we went to the pub, and I asked her. She ran an agency, and I asked her to come run a brand focus session with our small team. And I asked her to be really brutally honest about how she perceived our brand, just from the website and the kind of few bits of marketing material that we had. And it was a real eye opener because she said, "You're a people business. You're one of the most people I know, but your website is so corporate. It's just skyscrapers. There's no people on it. I know you're incredibly entrepreneurial and relationship focused, but there's nothing that shows us this. You just have lots of words that tell me what you're all about and what you do, but you're not showing me." And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, off the back of that conversation, and we completely pivoted the business. We revamped our website. We put our clients, and I mentioned Philippa earlier, we put our clients front and center. We did away with all the corporate language and the imagery. We made it more informal and engaging, just like the business we actually were. And it made a really big impact. And it was in that moment I stopped worrying about competition.
Yeah.
I was like, do you know what? We're going to be unapologetically JBM. We'll lean into our creativity. We launched a podcast then. We started to shout loud and proud about the work we do, and it was incredibly freeing. And this sort of it made me chuckle when I tried to headhunt somebody for our team from a competitor, which is what we do for a living, so it shouldn't come as a massive surprise. And this competitor CEO messaged me, basically warning me to back off. And he said, "Oh, if you come after my family, I'll come after yours," which I found quite hilarious at the time. Well, initially I was a bit taken aback, and then I thought, well, actually, you're wasting so much emotional energy here. If you do a good job, if you do a good job on your searches, your clients will stay with you. If you develop your team, incentivize them well, trust them, make it a great culture to come to, they won't leave. So I guess it's a kind of reframing, like my team are not my possessions. They are colleagues, they are people I love working with, and it's down to me to create an environment that they want to be in. And as soon as I don't do that, just as soon as I drop the ball with my clients, then I can have no complaints if they move on. So I think it's just it's kind of a funny thing how our industry has evolved. And now, I have many friends that are peers that run competitive businesses. I think it's changing, and I think we can learn a lot from each other. And I think this kind of territorial, possessive nature is becoming less commonplace, but it still exists, I'm sure, in a few companies.
I think it's so interesting to listen to you talk about that. So a bit coming through for me, James, about this conversation in the pub about confidence. There's something about that, right? I think there's something about confidence. So for me, it feels
Mm.
not very confident to send you a text saying back off. That's not confident, right? That's quite threatened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sense.
It's so true.
And confidence is a really lovely emotion. It's quite contagious. And so, does that make sense to you? Do you think that because you have this sort of confident approach, that I think what you're saying is I will rely on who we are to be the glue?
Yeah, yeah. I am a confident person, but I'm not. I have huge amounts of imposter syndrome. And I have many qualities that mean that I worry. Yeah, I get that from my mum. She's a warrior. So I don't want to paint the picture that I just everything's good and I can handle all things that come my way. When mistakes happen, which they do, I sometimes catastrophize about those things. But I do think what I am and I have become much better at is real. I have real conviction in the business that we've built. I
Yeah,
have real belief in the values that we adhere to, and I'm not. I am going to stick. For me, authenticity is everything in
yeah,
entrepreneurship, in business, and that's one thing that I am completely confident about. And I have sort of, so when people attack you or come for you or try to disrupt you, that's the thing that I can hold on to. And I find that as a business that keeps us really united because we all have a very shared vision that we are trying to disrupt this industry that is known for being incredibly transactional and dog
yeah.
eat dog, and we're just not like that. And that is kind of a warming feeling.
I love it, and it kind of shifts the framing of the business from let's collect our assets and then sell them to people that need them to one which is thinking about, right, as we said from the start, this idea that there's a really important network of people out there who should meet who,
It's all
who could
about,
add value
yeah,
to who, right?
yeah, connecting. I mean, for me, there is no greater pleasure and privilege to connect exceptional talent to incredible companies. We're very lucky. We work with high growth, disruptive startups that are wherever possible mission driven. So for me,
Mhm.
I don't ever see it as I have to sell to candidates to sell them the dream and get them into these jobs I don't really care about. It's absolutely the opposite. I feel very invested in our clients, very passionate
Mhm.
about the products and services, and really, if we're doing our job right, we should be a partner to them and an extension of their business. So I think
Mhm.
one of the feedbacks we often get is how we can bring opportunities to life in a way that maybe others can't, because we really do take the time to be that partner, to really get under the bonnet of businesses, to really understand their values and their culture, and then make sure we're assessing that rigorously enough. But also, we talk with great passion and purpose when it comes to our clients, and I think that's hopefully infectious, and often can maybe lure in people that maybe are passively looking or not necessarily, maybe on first glance weren't as interested. So for me, it's a great place to be. We're very lucky to do what we do.
I mean, so it comes across really strongly, and it's certainly every encounter, like from our very first encounter, everything that you say resonates completely with me. The way that we had our first conversation and how you kind of thought about and responded to me, deeply authentic, in line with what you're saying here. I'm just curious, as a leader of a founder-led startup business and getting to the point where you are now, how explicit you are about this sense of purpose that's coming across quite clearly, and about, the values. How do you embed that within your culture? Um,
Yeah, I mean, we obviously. we hire for mission and values alignment. I think I've always said that recruitment and exec search is not rocket science. We're not saving lives, it is just, it's people. But I think, but I do think we have the opportunity to have a massive impact. And the way that I always have framed it with my team and the people that I'm looking to hire that will really buy into that. They don't just see it as a job. They don't just see it as a chance to make commission. They see it as a chance to impact people's lives positively. Um, when you boil down to it, the biggest challenge most companies have is hiring. It's really
Yeah.
difficult to do, and it's
Yeah.
not to say that it's hugely complex, but it's very difficult. It's nuanced. So actually, when you think of it like that, so one, what we do can help solve the biggest challenge most companies have. Um, then on the other side of things, if we can help build the companies of the future by placing executives that have an exponential impact on those businesses, we are indirectly having a really big impact in the world. So for instance, it's a health tech that might be, trying to find a cure for cancer, or a climate tech business tackling the climate crisis. If we're placing the COO or the chief revenue officer or whatever into those businesses, that is impactful. So
Mhm.
the way that I like our team to think of it is you can play your small part in building these companies that are making a difference in the world. But also on the candidate side, you can change somebody's life for the better by finding them an exceptional job. Like that, if you think about, it's such a big thing to move jobs.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
stressful thing. It has massive implications on family, on
Yeah.
finances, on many things. So if you
Yeah.
can get somebody on the property ladder because you've got them a salary that enables them to buy a house, or if you are able to take somebody out of a job where they're killing themselves 14 hours a day and give them some time back with their family, or somebody that's been in a corporate their whole life who desperately wants purpose, and you're able to move them into a company where they feel super passionate and aligned. All of those things are life changing, and all of those things are hugely impactful. So I find it incredibly rewarding, and so I don't find it that difficult for us to be centered in that sort of mission. And that's very much what I look for in our team when I'm hiring. It's not about just the biggest billers. It's about people that genuinely believe that they're going to make a difference. And of course, the money follows. I think if you treat it like that, that's very different to the vast majority of recruiters, and that's what I think has given us a real differentiator in the market, and hopefully I will continue to have a long and successful sort of business. So yeah, it's all about changing perceptions and really caring. And I think care is at the heart of our business.
So maybe I can just, I think that's just such a beautiful way of putting it and really interesting. And my sense is that it probably just pours out of you, and that it's quite inspiring, and it's interesting to meet an executive search business that's so deeply purpose-led. And also, making a great success of that. But I wonder, things must also go wrong, right? So there must be occasions where you make a placement and it turns out not to be right, or there must be occasions where things happen with a team member and it doesn't conform to your values. And I often think that these are the kind of stand-up moments where you kind of really test them. So, talk to us about that. Talk to us about the harder stuff for a minute, and about
Yeah,
how you deal with the more challenging, um, let's call them, I don't want them mistakes, but things that don't
learnings.
go quite so right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, there's so many. There's so many. Yeah, and I don't want to paint the rosiest of pictures, because the last year has been brutal. It's been a really difficult economy. We grew quickly. We doubled in size. And I know this sounds ironic given my day job, we've mishired. We have not always got hiring right. And that's sometimes embarrassing to admit, but I think it's also the reality of recruitment. Um, you will not get every hire right, and I've come to accept this. It's as painful as it is.
Yeah,
Sometimes you get it wrong, and sometimes that's just it. And in our case, it's never really been about bad eggs or anything. Everyone we've hired has always been really aligned to the mission, but they've not always been perfect for this. We're a very entrepreneurial startup business that needs really self-sufficient, very sort of proactive individuals, and not everybody is right for that. So there are times where we've hired people who bring that kind of incredible gravitas and experience from top search firms that just struggle to adapt to our ways of working. And so I always try to learn from them. It's always quite bruising when you get it wrong. But yeah, I've mishired before. We had a pretty, probably six or so years ago. This is the older version, I guess, JBM 1.0. We did recruit for startups, but that was the smallest part of what we did. And actually, we were still working with big banks, big consultancies, and boutiques as well. And we'd grown quite quickly. On the outside, everything was perfect. Doubled revenues year on year, doubled the team year on year. But actually, internally, we had hired corporate recruiters. We'd hired the people that I'd kind of escaped from, who were
Yeah.
lovely and all wanted to work in a more entrepreneurial setting, but they were much better suited for that. So we'd mishired. I was still billing the most, and others were struggling to kind of bill, and our cost base had ratcheted up. And I got to the point where I was working ludicrous hours. I was barely around to see my daughter in her first couple of years. I missed so many important moments because I had this, I've got to make this work. And I got to a point where we had two clients that went out of business and owed us sort of 60, 70 grand. And I was about to miss payroll at Christmas. And it was the most stressful experience of my life. It was awful. And we managed to hustle. We sold a retainer that covered payroll. And I swore to myself, we cannot ever get into this situation again. And then 3 months later, it was looking tight. And at that point, I kind of had like an intervention from one of my board advisors and great mentors, a guy called Fred Jones. We were in sort of wartime session where we were trying to work through how do we change this cycle, because on the surface everything is great, but actually financially it was just not working. And he cut through the noise and he looked at our data and he said, why are you spending all this time working with these corporates who take forever, who don't pay you on time, who don't value the work you do in the partnership approach, when you get so much energy from working with startups? And that's where you're passionate. They work faster. It's a growth area. It's where a lot of the talent is going. And I needed that external mentor to see something very clear that I just couldn't see. And that started what was the hardest part of my journey so far, but also the most impactful, which was we restructured the team from 8 to 3. We literally got rid of all of our corporate clients overnight, and we decided to go on this new journey of starting afresh, focusing exclusively on startups and scale-ups, and that's what the business is today. So it was very difficult. There were a lot of really hard conversations. But again, those pivots sometimes are the making of you. And although it was a really difficult experience, I was very grateful to have a very supportive board and mentors around me, and we got through it. And then we ended up having a record year with just 3 people. And that was when we launched the podcast, went through the rebrand, and did all that other stuff I talked about earlier.
That's such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so inspiring, people. And often I think on the outside, businesses that grow over the years, everything looks perfect. The reality is it can be incredibly hard. It's a roller coaster ride. You have those downtimes, so it's incredibly valuable to have that story shared. And there's something really deep in that, isn't there, about getting to a point in the business where you've got just about enough to lean into who you really are. And to me, there's something really interesting in that story about how that's energetic in such a good way.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and actually that was where I really realized that we had the right people for
Mm,
the fight, because we kept our sort of the two best, the 2 people that I thought would be best for the next stage of the journey. And I had to sit down with them and say, look, I know this is not what you signed up for, but
Yeah.
this is my vision for what I think we're going to be. I think it's going to be better than ever, and
Mhm.
it's going to be a much more flexible business. You're going to have loads of say
Yeah.
and opportunity to try things. We're going to launch a podcast, and their response was, "Don't worry, like we're pumped to be a part of this. We're excited to go again." And that it's those sorts of moments where you really do lean on your colleagues. It could easily have been a case that they'd have just left and I'd have been right back to where I started, but it wasn't. That time was probably the most fun I've
Yeah.
had, because we were just trying stuff and it just felt like us against the world, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's very unifying.
Yeah, and it digs really deep into purpose, and so it's a great kind of place to come to a conclusion to talk about the so what of purpose, right? And I think it's kind of shone through everything, from the opening part of the conversation about random networking encounters on trains, and how powerful they've been, to this talking about your journey of discovery of who the business should really be. The so what of purpose is that it's energizing and motivating, right? I think that's the thing. I wonder if I can just momentarily just grab an answer from you for Matt, who's posted up on the chat, just going back to that kind of networking thing. So most people have days where they're not in the mood to go out and meet other people, but still need to, right? So that's a nice framing. How do you get the most from relationship building when you're feeling that way?
Yeah, we've all been there. So firstly, I think it's absolutely fine to feel that way, and I think we also have to be kind to ourselves that sometimes you're just not in the mood to engage with other people, and that's fine. I think we all need alone time. We all need time to ourselves, and so I would say wherever possible, if you don't have to go out and you're sort of not in that sociable mood, because you might not bring your best self to that conversation, but if you have to, I guess there are a couple of things. It depends on how much control you have over the situation. Where possible, I actually prefer intimate settings. So if I'm going to a big event, I find that quite overwhelming. I'll be honest. I know it probably doesn't seem that way, but I really do, and I tend to skirt around the edges. you know, but what I try to do is create little pockets to have sort of smaller conversations just off the side. I don't throw myself in trying to talk to everybody. I try to be kind to myself to say, look, actually, just one meaningful conversation will be beneficial. And then it's about just if you're not feeling like you want to talk too much, for me, it's asking questions. And what I find is people like to talk. People like to. I mean, I've been talking for ages today. And if you can get somebody talking about something that they're passionate about, and you can make them feel heard and listened to, that's a really powerful sentiment, and people really appreciate that. So what I would say, if you're not in full on sales mode, then I would try and find a friendly face. I would ask them some questions, get them to do most of the talking, and see if you can build a connection. And I find sometimes when I'm not in the mood, all it takes is one smile, a joke, somebody to kind of lift my spirits a bit, or to engage me in a topic that I'm passionate about, and quite quickly that mood can shift. So I would say that that's one thing. Another way is to kind of to kind of curate your own events that work for you. So it's not doesn't always have to be to go to these big conferences. Can you bring some interesting people together that you want to do business with, or that you naturally connect with? Because magic happens, I find, in those smaller, intimate settings. And I found some of the best networkings I've been to have been breakfasts for 6 to 8 people, and actually where it's really informal. There's lots of just non-work chat as well, and people can become a bit more vulnerable, I find, in those settings, and be really honest, and people drop their guards, and I find that is where you get the magic, and where you build the trust. And that's really, I guess, at the heart of, for me, what networking is about. It's about building a rapport with somebody, building that trust, and then building on that relationship. Because I don't always think that one person you meet at an event is going to be the next client for the next however many years, but they might know the right person. And so I think making a good impression, getting to know people, building your network, can sometimes have this sort of ripple effect, which can be very powerful.
I completely love that, Matt. I hope that's been helpful. And thank you, James, for your genius this morning and being so generous in sharing all of this stuff with our guests. So, thank you. It's been amazing. I'm going to wrap up the interview just now, and in a moment, we'll just turn the mics on, and those of you who are still around can jump on for a minute and just ask some questions in person with the recording off. And I've got another question here, which we can pick up in just a moment. So, if it's okay, I'm just going to talk to people about what's coming up next, and then we'll close the show and see if anyone wants to just talk to you directly for a moment, if that's okay.
Cool. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so delighted to talk about Todd. So Todd is my favorite professor of psychology, and author of Provoked, and other amazing similar kind of styled pieces. And I'm absolutely stoked to have Todd on Strategy Cafe next time, where we're going to be talking about all of the difficult feelings that people have and how to channel them towards your positive goals. Todd Kashdan is global leader on the art of positive psychology and really inspiring on harnessing our energy, whether we feel good about it or bad about it. So it's a really fabulous opportunity just to unpack optimizing and broadening your emotional range and experience with someone who is really deeply insightful and interesting to chat to on the topic. So go check that out on the website. It's on the 25th of July. It's going to be a little bit of a different time zone because he's on the East Coast of the US. And subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on that.